On a stormy evening, Emily arrived at an old, forgotten inn on the outskirts of town. The building, once elegant, now seemed to sag under the weight of time, its weathered facade blending into the gloom. Inside, the innkeeper, an elderly woman with hollow eyes, greeted her with a slow, deliberate nod. She handed Emily a key without a word, her hand trembling slightly. "Room 6, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. The inn felt abandoned, its narrow halls stretching too long, lit by dim, flickering lights that cast distorted shadows. Room 6 was at the far end, isolated. Inside, the room was modest, its most prominent feature a large ornate mirror hanging directly across from the bed. The air was heavy, as if untouched for years. As the night deepened, the storm outside grew fiercer, yet it was the noises inside the inn that unsettled Emily the most. Soft, indistinct whispers echoed through the walls, as though voices were seeping in from another time. Footsteps followed, slow, steady pacing in the hallway outside room 6. When the sound stopped, silence settled, thick and unnatural. There was no one outside the door. The hours passed slowly, but the unease only deepened. The whispers continued, growing louder. At one point, a faint scratching came from the mirror, though nothing seemed out of place. The mirror's reflection held only the room behind her, unchanged. Yet it felt wrong, as if the mirror saw something she couldn't. By midnight, the pacing returned, this time inside the room. The air turned cold, and a heavy dread hung in the stillness. Emily was gone, and in her place, the room had shifted. The mirror no longer reflected the present, but seemed to offer a glimpse of the past, a version of the room from decades before, furnished differently, with shadows moving in ways they shouldn't. The figure of a man appeared in the reflection. He was tall, with a gaunt face twisted in madness, standing in the corner, watching. His eyes seemed alive in the mirror, fixed on the empty bed, waiting. The innkeeper never spoke of what happened that night, but the next morning, room 6 stood empty. Emily had vanished, leaving her belongings neatly arranged as if she had never stayed. Her car remained untouched outside, keys resting on the nightstand. The innkeeper, as usual, tidied the room in silence, her eyes occasionally drifting to the mirror. She knew the truth. Room 6 had been abandoned for years, ever since her son, deranged and violent, had disappeared inside. They never found him, but they never needed to. He never left. The whispers were his, the pacing his restless torment. And the mirror, it held the room in its grip, trapped between past and present, where he still lingered, forever watching, forever waiting. Room 6 was cursed, caught in a loop where the past refused to fade. And the living who entered found themselves pulled into its haunted embrace. Guests who stayed never truly left, becoming part of the inn's silent history, swallowed by the echoes of a ghost who would never let them go. In a quiet town nestled among rolling hills, the Gray family had always been respected. Their estate, an old manor surrounded by ancient trees, stood like a sentinel at the edge of the village. It was in this manor, during a chilly autumn of 1984, that something dark began to take hold. The youngest daughter, 𝐬𝐨𝐫, once bright and full of life, began to change. At first, it was subtle. She became withdrawn, her laughter fading into silence, her once warm eyes clouded with something unknown. She spoke less and began to spend hours alone in her room, staring blankly at the walls. Her family thought it was just a phase, a passing illness perhaps, but soon the situation took a far more sinister turn. One night, as the wind howled outside, 𝐬𝐨𝐫's mother, Margaret, heard whispers from her daughter's room. Thinking 𝐬𝐨𝐫 was talking in her sleep, she quietly entered. What she found made her blood run cold. 𝐬𝐨𝐫 was sitting upright, eyes wide open, but they were not her own. Her lips moved, but the words that came out were incomprehensible, guttural, not from any language Margaret had ever heard. The air in the room was thick, oppressive, as if something malevolent was watching from the shadows. As the days passed, 𝐬𝐨𝐫's condition worsened. Strange occurrences plagued the manor. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut, and a foul stench permeated the air. 𝐬𝐨𝐫's voice, once sweet and innocent, now carried a dark edge, filled with malice. The family was terrified, and no doctor could explain what was happening. In desperation, Margaret reached out to Father Gregory, the town's priest. He was a man of strong faith, known for his calm demeanor and devotion. Upon entering the manor, however, even he felt the weight of something unnatural lurking within its walls. He agreed to perform a ritual, a cleansing, something to drive away whatever darkness had taken hold of 𝐬𝐨𝐫. That night, the ritual began in 𝐬𝐨𝐫's room. Father Gregory stood at the foot of the bed, clutching his rosary as he recited ancient prayers. 𝐬𝐨𝐫, bound to the bed to stop her violent thrashing, let out a low growl. Her eyes, once gentle, now glowed with something vile. The room grew colder with every word the priest spoke, and a sinister laughter filled the air, deep, mocking, and inhuman. As the night wore on, the atmosphere thickened, pressing down on Father Gregory. The walls of the room seemed to pulse, and shadows danced wildly as the candles flickered. 𝐬𝐨𝐫's body contorted in ways that should have been impossible, her voice no longer her own but that of something ancient and evil. "She belongs to me," the entity hissed through 𝐬𝐨𝐫, its words like venom. Father Gregory's hand shook, but he continued, his voice rising above the howling winds outside. "Leave her," he commanded, his voice trembling with both fear and faith. The darkness in the room swirled around them, and 𝐬𝐨𝐫's body convulsed violently. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The room fell deathly silent. 𝐬𝐨𝐫 collapsed onto the bed, unconscious but alive. For a moment, it seemed as if the nightmare had ended. But as Father Gregory gathered his things, a faint whisper echoed through the room, a voice that did not belong to 𝐬𝐨𝐫. "You may have won today, but I am not gone." From that day forward, the manor was never the same. 𝐬𝐨𝐫 recovered, but something in her eyes had changed. Something distant, haunted. The family moved away soon after, leaving the house abandoned, shrouded in mystery and fear. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the gray manor, warning strangers to stay far from its doors, especially at night. For in the darkness, they said, you could still hear 𝐬𝐨𝐫's voice, no longer a girl's, but a twisted, mocking echo of the evil that had once claimed her. And it was waiting, always watching, for the next soul to claim. In the small, sleepy town of 𝐸𝐻, a forgotten videotape was found in the attic of an old, abandoned house. The tape, wrapped in a plain cover, had the ominous label, "Watch Me," scribbled on it. Amelia, a local journalist with a penchant for the mysterious, stumbled upon it during a routine cleanup of the house's dusty contents. Curiosity got the better of Amelia. She took the tape home, intrigued by its cryptic message. That night, she sat alone in her living room, the flicker of the old VCR casting eerie shadows on the walls. The tape began with a series of unsettling images. An old, decrepit house with peeling wallpaper, shadowy figures darting in and out of view, and strange symbols that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. The final frame showed a static-filled broadcast and a chilling voice that whispered, "You have 7 days." Initially dismissing it as a clever prank, Amelia continued with her daily life. But as the days wore on, she experienced a series of bizarre and terrifying events. Her phone rang at odd hours with no one on the other end. Strange, distorted figures appeared in her photographs. And every night, she was plagued by nightmares of the haunted house from the tape. Desperate for answers, Amelia reached out to the town's elderly historian, Mr. Caldwell, known for his knowledge of local lore and legends. Mr. Caldwell revealed that the tape was rumored to be linked to a series of mysterious disappearances and deaths from decades past. The tape had once belonged to a reclusive filmmaker, Ethan Blackwood, whose final project was said to have been cursed. Blackwood had vanished under suspicious circumstances, and many believed he had used the tape to bind a malevolent spirit to it. Determined to end the curse, Amelia visited the abandoned house featured in the tape. The house, now decrepit and covered in overgrown ivy, seemed to throb with an oppressive presence. Inside, she found clues to Blackwood's final days, scattered notes and eerie sketches of the very symbols from the tape. As the seventh day approached, Amelia's fear escalated. The oppressive atmosphere of the house seemed to follow her. Shadows moved with a life of their own, and she could feel a sinister presence closing in on her. On the final night, the house became a nightmare of shifting shadows and ghostly whispers. In a desperate attempt to escape the curse, Amelia decided to destroy the tape. She placed it in the fireplace, but as the flames roared to life, the room plunged into darkness. The tape, untouched by the fire, continued to play, its haunting images more vivid than ever. The final message was now a chilling command: "You cannot escape." Amelia's scream echoed through the house as the static-filled broadcast enveloped her. And then, silence. The next morning, the house was found empty and the tape was gone. The only clue left behind was a single frame from the tape, showing a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room, watching. The tape, now missing, became a new legend in 𝐼𝐸, a dark tale of a journalist who uncovered a cursed relic and paid the ultimate price. The abandoned house remained a place of whispered warnings, and the tape's curse was said to linger, waiting for the next curious soul to discover its chilling message.